Okay. So first, thank you for thank
We'll
you.
start with the intro, Laurent. We'll start with the intro, and then I'll switch over to you. I'll introduce you. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us to this webinar on the status of the battery energy storage for CNI and utility sectors in MENA. This is organized by the Middle East Solar Industry Association. My name is Hind. I am the MESIA Middle East. I am MESIA Marketing and Operations Director. This event is powered by Solar Arabic, and I would like to introduce you first, your moderator, Mr. Rabat Gerat, one of the strategic advisors at MESIA.
All right, thank you, Hind. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be moderating today's webinar with the topic focusing on storage. We will be looking at storage from both perspectives, from utility scale as well as from CNI, and hopefully trying to uncover some of the points related to the topic of storage. As you know, in our region, the topic of storage is often discussed, but unfortunately, it's one of the topics that has the least traction, I should say, in terms of policies, mandates, and projects. And hopefully today, with the panel that we have, we'll be able to uncover some of these points. Today, to introduce our panelists, we have with us Laurent Longuette, CEO of Siraj Power, and we have Rohit Kumar, who's a director at Synergy Consulting, and we have Mu'tasim Al-Bitar, who's Director of Sales Business Development at SMA. To start, I would like to invite our panelists to introduce their organizations and maybe talk about your plans, if it's related to storage in 23. Maybe, Laurent, you can give us just a quick intro about Siraj Power, what you're doing currently.
Yes, thank you, Ed, for this introduction. Thank you to MESIA for organizing this event and for inviting me. So, Siraj Power, we are a distributed solar developer. We are based from Dubai, operating in the region and expanding to the wider region. So we have a portfolio of solar assets over 100 megawatt, keeps expanding. We have been during the first years of the company focusing mostly on solar on grid, but as I will share in the next few slides, we are now proposing some new solutions, including storage, and but still with the focus on the CNI market, which is really where we want to continue developing the company.
Very well, thank you, Laurent. Rohit, maybe tell us a little bit about Synergy Consulting, please.
Sure, thanks a lot, Rad. So Synergy, we are a 20-year-old company. We are primarily into infrastructure financial advisory. One of the key markets for us, obviously, is Middle East. That's where we grew from. And since we have been there for 20 years, and power and water, these are the two key sectors. And within the power sectors, we have obviously seen how the power markets have evolved in this region. Both conventional, renewable, and in renewable space, we've had the opportunity to work with developers on some of the utility scale projects which were, tendered out, in various geographies in this region. So, because we are an advisor, obviously we get to interact with a lot of stakeholders, including developers, financiers, off-takers, and we do get an idea of, what are the various risks, concerns, which each of these stakeholders have in relation to such storage projects. So, I'm hoping to, be able to participate and contribute in this exciting webinar and, just share our thoughts on this in this industry.
Excellent. Thank you, Rohit. Last but not least, Mu'tasim. Not everybody knows SMA, so I guess that'll be easy.
Thank you, Dr. Raed, and thank you for the kind introduction. I'll just give a quick intro about SMA. So we've been founded in 1981, 40 years and more than 40 years in the business, primarily active in power conversion equipment. So we're a supplier of inverters, battery inverters, and now we're venturing also into electrolyzer converters for the power to gas markets. We've been active in the Middle East via our Dubai office for more than 10 years now, covering Middle East, East and North Africa. I'm also working closely with the South African office based out of Cape Town, covering sub-Saharan Africa with a lot of interesting storage applications. Globally, we've been very active in utility scale storage, which I'll touch base upon in our webinar today. And yeah, that's in brief about SMA. Back to you, Dr. Raed.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mu'tasim. Before we dig in, I would like to ask everyone to please share your questions and comments in the Q&A tab. We will allow 10-15 minutes towards the end to address your questions. So please go ahead and do that. Don't wait till the end to submit the questions. We will start with a presentation from Laurent, focusing on the application of storage in the CNI sector. Laurent, the floor is yours.
Laurent, are you with us?
I'm on mute. Do you see my screen?
Yes. You're back.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Raed, for the introduction. So very quickly on Siraj Power, because we have already talked about it, and it's not really the topic of this discussion. So as I was mentioning, Siraj Power, it's about on-grid distributed solar business. That's where probably we are known today, with more than 200 solar system under operation in the region. We have lately developed in the off-grid power business and on-demand solar energy, which are two of the application of storage into CNI that I would like to
Sorry,
discuss.
Laurent. Sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt, Laurent. Are you sure the screen is visible?
I cannot see it. I cannot see it. Also.
Did you share the screen on the screen share button?
I did it twice. I'm doing for the third time. Do you see it or?
I still can't see it.
I'm afraid not yet.
I don't know. Anything? No? Okay, I don't know because apparently it's please grant access. Okay, maybe Raed, if you don't mind giving the floor to someone else, I will try to.
Okay, shall we start with Mu'tasim then?
Yeah, I'm very sorry for that.
No problem. No problem. We can check with him, Munif. But Mu'tasim, are you ready with the slides?
Yes, I am. Let's hope it works.
Let's see if it works with you. Go ahead, please. We'll come back to you.
Thank you. Sorry for that.
No problem.
Okay, 1 second, please.
You're getting the same thing, huh?
No, seems to be. Okay, let's give it another try.
Oh, now it's something is happening. No, okay. Now it's on.
Perfect.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Perfect. So yeah, I mean, I prepared myself to prevent after Laurent to touch base on some of the C&I, but I think we'll switch around a bit. So hello, everyone. I'll be focusing a bit more on utility scale storage applications, given that inverters are playing a very key role in that segment. So I hope I'll touch base on some applications we've been installing globally. Can you hear me clearly, Dr. Raed, just to confirm?
Yes, you're good.
Perfect. So I wanted to take a step back and really assess what storage applications are applicable in the Middle East and North African region. I'll also refer to a couple of projects globally. Throughout my presentation, I'll be brief, hopefully less than 10 minutes. I'll give a global and regional introduction about SMA, touch base on the future of power generation, and then look at energy versus power applications and utility scale storage, and then give some key references touching base on lag start and frequency response, mainly. So a quick intro about SMA. So we've been 40 years in the business, more than 30,500 employees strong, with projects exceeding 120 gigawatts installed in more than 190 countries and holding more than 1,700 patents. We're geographically placed across the different regions, mainly split to 3 segments: Americas, and our offices in Canada, America, and Chile; MEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, where I'm reporting to Dubai and Cape Town's office; and then you have Asia Pacific, APAC, which is India, Japan, and we have an office also in Australia. Just a quick one. Do you mind muting? There's some noise coming up. I'm not sure from where. Perfect. Thank you. And quick recap on our history. So in 1987, we developed the first transistor inverter for the photovoltaic segment. We were actually the innovators of the string technology, which is based out of our headquarters in Kassel. We ventured into storage back in 2001 with our Sunny Island grid forming off-grid string inverter, which we further developed and are still currently selling it with, of course, newer technology. I'll just touch base on the storage applicable products we're offering. In 2013, we developed our SMA fuel safe controller, which is now called the hybrid controller, which seamlessly integrates different energy resources, be it diesel gensets with PV, also with the grid, so it will work as the brain of any system. And in 2019, we developed our Sunny Central Up inverter, which is our central offering, ranging up to 4.6 megawatts. And there's also an AC battery inverter, as well as an AC battery inverter together with DC coupling storage option with it, which we are strongly selling now in the US, Australia, Japan, and globally. In terms of portfolio, our portfolio covers different segments of the energy integration, all the way starting from energy monitoring with our Sunny Portal being the world's largest monitoring platform for SMA equipment. And then we have a generation of solar power string inverters ranging from 1.5 kilowatts all the way to central inverters of 4.6 megawatts. We're also in energy storage and power to gas applications, also on multiple segments, residential, commercial, and utility. We also ventured into the power to gas market back in 2019 with more than 20 executed reference globally for hydrogen applications via our electrolyzer converters. We're also active energy management through our NXO OS operating system, and an energy market integration by our subsidiary Coneva, which works on digital energy services. So I would like to talk a bit more on the future of power generation as more renewables are being connected to the grid. I mean, renewable energies and storage systems are forming the backbone of the future of energy supply. We can already see it in Europe as they try to be more energy independent, and in the US where you have excess, in states such as California where you have excess renewable energy generated. And in order to integrate them seamlessly and have a secure, reliable power supply, a comprehensive understanding of storage applications is required. And for this, I would like to, the time is limited, so I'd like to jump straight into the topic of defining what's power versus energy applications, which is key in understanding the fundamentals of storage, right? I always like to compare it to an electric vehicle, since now they're coming more and more often. Energy applications is how long is the range of your electric vehicle. Power application is more of how fast can your car accelerate from 0 to 100. And those two applications are quite significant in developing the backbone of our future grid. I always like to use this small visual here to define where power application transitions into energy application. So if you look at this axis here, that's the percentage of renewable energy penetration in the grid, starting from 0% all the way to 100%. And then the reaction or the response rate you would want from batteries, from the milliseconds all up the way to the months, hopefully sometime in the future. So as you get more renewable energy penetration in the grid, we would want to start to compensate for spinning reserves and add more power applications in order to grow the market further and to still have a very stable grid. Further development into renewable penetration into the grid, you would need frequency and voltage stabilization applications to keep your grid stable at, for example, 50 hertz, to make sure that supply demand in the milliseconds and seconds, the response rate is quite fast. Of course, in the energy applications, you'd look at peak shaving, which mainly proactively manages the overall demand to eliminate short-term demand spikes and to smoothen the power generation, renewable energy power delivery. Sorry. And of course, there's energy shifting and power firming, which I'll touch further a bit on them shortly. Now, apart from the technical aspect, to set the tone, at least for maybe Rohit can also add some here later in that webinar, what revenue streams do developers look at when we're discussing storage? Now, if you look at the UK, you look at Europe, and as well as the US with their market structure, developers are aiming to multiple stack revenue streams from their assets when it comes to storage, right? So there's a lot of options and innovations that are happening in storage applications, and how can you apply them economically to generate revenue for the developer and as well for the grid to have a more stable network. And by that, I mean things like virtual inertia, capacity markets, and frequency control are all three revenue streams that usually work closely together, given that you're looking at fast response rate and power applications. Developers tend to look at how we can stack them and create economic reasoning behind that investment. Of course, there are other applications like energy arbitrage, wholesale arbitrage, peak shaving, and ancillary services. So it's really good to look at just those couple of applications and see how we can apply them in the Middle East. Do we really need them today? What's the reasoning behind it? I also listed here a couple of behind the meter and front the meter storage applications. I think Laurent will probably touch base a bit on backup power, peak shaving for the C&I segment, and that will also help set the pace for our webinar today. But can we really define a case for the utility scale storage market? I wanted to end my presentation on that question. But before doing that, I'll also refer to two references that we see we have built in Europe. First one is the Pelham project, which the key application is grid frequency regulation, noting that this project was commissioned already in 2017, and there's a lot has been done since then. But that's also interesting to see that Europe, UK, and the world has moved in storage, while in the Middle East, there's a lot of talk, but not yet proper strategy towards storage. But of course, a lot of reasoning behind it, which include regulation. And
how big is this project?
Yes, that's a 64 MVA, 50 megawatt hour storage. And the main participate mainly in grid frequency regulation. I chose only standalone storage applications to show you that you can use storage without PV, because there's some misperception in our region here. So we'd use actually storage assets to support the grid without the need for photovoltaics. And then one last project here, I think Munif knows also about it. The Borders Home project in Germany, very interesting concept. It's made possible with SMA storage technology to get a whole town off the transition grid in Germany for an hour. And that town ran on renewable energy resources, wind, solar, and biomass, and then reconnected it back to the grid after an hour with 0 interruptions. So the functionalities that we use here are grid support functionalities, as well as grid forming applications, of course. And it was enabled with a black start function. In case the grid went down, then you can power up the whole grid after an outage using battery storage applications.
Very well, Mu'tasim.
Perfect.
Do you have more slides, or this is it?
That's it. No, I'll hand it back to Laurent.
We'll hand it to Laurent, and while Laurent starts up his slides, I have just a couple of comments on your presentation. Do you have any idea about the breakdown of the storage market for SMA? Is it more residential or is it more utility?
On the top of my head, I would say, given the scale of utility, we have been very active in that segment, especially in markets like the UK, US, where there is a market behind ancillary services, frequency control, and multiple revenue stacking. But of course, the residential sector had picked up extremely well in Europe, given the last year, especially after the energy independence route they're going through and having your own energy stored. And of course, the increased prices of kilowatt hours residential segment drove that market toward
driven by energy security. I mean, they're talking about the connections, right? Very well. I'll give it now to Laurent. We see your slides, Laurent. You're on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Apparently, my computer was not ready to share the screen while the seminar was recorded, so I had to change it. So sorry for that. So just I was just mentioning that in Siraj we are about historically about on-grid solar business, distributed solar business. We have in the last years developed our off-grid business, and as well as what we call on-demand solar energy, and that's two of the applications or solutions that I want to discuss with you today. So first, out of the three different applications of storage into the CNI or distributed market, the first one, probably the most well-known one, is what we call off-grid or hybrid or off-grid hybrid, whatever. So basically, it consists for various different type of business segments, or some industrial applications not connected to the grid, and we have many in the region. Crushers as well. Most or all the crushers in the regions currently run on diesel generator. Construction sites is another segment where generally during the time of the construction you are not connected to the grid and running on diesel. We see some of these applications as well for camps, so labor camp, refugee camps, and all such kind of temporary facilities, generally set up far from main cities, and most of the time running on diesel generator. Highland, so this is something which is very well known in some other regions, such as Pacific Island or Caribbean islands, and our friends from Masdar have implemented a lot of such hybrid projects in this application. Actually, interestingly, we start seeing such application being relevant as well in the region, and especially in Dubai, with all the artificial islands being built, and of course those living in Dubai know about the World Island, where there are a lot of facilities now being erected, and most of them running on diesel generator. Finally, military camps and oil and gas are in the same situation, quite remote, a lot of energy demand, temporary sites, so generally no access to the grid. So for all this application, and you see there's a variety of application in terms of size, in terms of duration, in terms of power requirements. For all of these applications, using a combination of solar, diesel, and storage is the right solution. Including storage in the picture helps to increase the quantity of solar you can install, and so can further reduce the diesel consumption. So generally, we say that without storage, the maximum solar penetration you can achieve is in the range of, let's say, 20-25%, sometimes 30%. when you install some storage, it can bring this solar penetration up to 50, 60, 70% in an economic manner. And these solutions are now made available in an economic way. I mean, you can do it and save on your electricity bill. So it's not only about reducing your carbon footprint. So these solutions are becoming more and more popular. So here I'm just showing a system not very far from Dubai. It's a Tilal Al Ghab, so it's a new residential complex being built in Dubai, where such a system has been recently commissioned and will generate sizable savings for the client, and on top of it, will shift their electric consumption from pure diesel to a very significant share of solar with the usage of battery. So that's the first application. The second one is a bit new, but we at least for the region, it already exists in some other part of the world, but we are implementing this in Dubai, and I believe this we will see more and more coming, especially in the context of electric vehicles being deployed on a fast track in the region. So basically, what is on demand solar energy? This is a typical construction site, a tower crane, very congested area where you can see you cannot install solar, and people running on diesel generator. So in such a situation, generally you cannot connect to the grid. The grid is not available. You cannot install solar because you don't have enough space to install solar. So one solution which is being brought using storage is this on-demand solar energy, where basically you have a solar system somewhere. So in Siraj Power, we have 200 of them spread throughout the UAE, where you have some charging station, and you bring your trucks and your battery to this charging station. When the battery is full of solar energy, you bring it to your construction site, you connect it to the grid and of the site, and you will use this energy until the battery is empty, and then you replace it. So this system it exists already in some places in Europe, where using diesel in cities is just not possible anymore, not authorized anymore. In Dubai, we have started to implement this system, and again, it's generating some saving for customers. This is one second potential application of storage in the CNI market, and again, I'm sure we will see more and more of these solutions for electric vehicles, given that most probably we'll see the number of electric vehicles on the road increasing faster than the grid infrastructure. So that's a good potential solution. The third one is peak shaving behind the meter. So what is peak shaving behind the meter? For those working in the power sector, including in Dubai, where the grid is strong, you have probably seen many situations like the one showing on this graph. So you have a facility connected to the grid with a certain grid capacity. This is this horizontal line. But as said, during a certain point of the day, and these are real data, you can see that the consumption is in excess of the grid capacity. So in this situation, what's generally done by the users is to shift part of the loads to diesel generators, and that's exactly what's happening on this real example, where actually the loads 4, 5, 6 are connected to some diesel generators, while other loads are connected to the grid. And because thanks to this split, it works because load 1 to 3 remains lower than the grid. Anyhow, it's not very satisfactory because you run part of your load on diesel generator, and that's where peak shaving can make sense. So peak shaving, what do you do when you do peak shaving? You connect all your loads together. So this is this additional connection in red that we represented on the top. And in green here, you will add a battery system, and you will connect your battery system in parallel to the grid and in parallel to the load. And what will happen is that during the hours where your cumulative load is in excess of the grid capacity, the energy missing will come from the battery. And on contrary, at 4 p.m., for instance, on this example, when the energy demand is less than the grid, then you will recharge your battery so you can use again what's in your battery later. And so with such a solution, you can simply, without any infrastructure, because you don't need to reinforce the grid, you don't need to reinforce your electric network, you can shift all your loads to the grid. So that's again an application which we believe is extremely relevant in the region where you have a lot of facilities in such a situation, and where actually this can bring a lot of value without necessarily increasing the capacity of the grid itself. So that's the three applications very quickly I wanted to present with you about how storage can be used in the C&I sector. Thank you for your attention, and if you have some question, I'm sure we'll have time after to try to answer it.
Thank you, Laurent. These are excellent examples. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions, but a couple of quick points. The storage rental business, you guarantee the clients that every kilowatt hour in the batteries is only charged from PV, from a clean source. It's not charged from PV. It's only from a clean source.
Yeah, exactly. Here in this energy demand and this solar energy, on-demand solar energy, this is what we guarantee the client. So we use, actually in Siraj, we have a unique situation in the sense that we have in UAE more than 200 solar systems operating. So we have some excess energy produced from time to time on some sites. And so we are capable to use this excess energy to charge batteries. And so literally the energy we bring to the clients are initially produced by the solar system. So it's not a solar energy produced on the site, but it's a solar energy brought by the batteries to the end user.
Yes, that's clear. And I don't want to get too technical. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions, but the applications you serve, you said crushers and cranes.
Yes.
The battery alone, lithium-ion battery, can handle the inrush currents. Maybe Mu'tasim can get into that as well. You have no issue with the harsh inrush current with the loads. When the crane turns on, I know there is a big, spike in current. You have no issues with the application, just feeding it with batteries.
So actually, this on-demand solar energy, so we don't use it on crusher. Crusher in general have a very high demand, so that's where we prefer to propose a hybrid solution with a combination of diesel, solar, and batteries. For a construction site with tower crane, it's true that there are some peak demand, but that's where a battery system is extremely relevant, because you can produce for a few seconds a very high power with a battery system without oversizing your system. Contrary to a diesel generator, where really you need to size your diesel generator by the 1 or 2 second peak of your consumption. So typically on a construction site, you must have huge diesel generator that will run only at their peak capacity for few seconds. With battery, you have this tolerance. The electronics make it possible for a couple of seconds or 5 seconds to produce at 200-300% of your design. So you are not obliged to over design actually.
Very well. I'll shift now the mics. Rahat, you've seen the two presentations. I mean, a couple of points caught my attention, and maybe you can give a perspective on how you see the market developing. I mean, the examples that were brought in, I mean, we see the market in C&I. The market C&I, as Laurent presented, has different applications, and it's a matter who comes in with a better product and better service, cheaper rate, and so on. But on the utility scale, I mean, the examples were given in markets that are unbundled, deregulated. In MENA region, we are vertically integrated utilities from billing to generation. How do you see storage? I mean, today we don't have really much storage in MENA. Maybe give us a perspective from the business side. How do you see the market design or market structure enabling storage in MENA? Go ahead, please.
Sure. Thanks, Ed. See, you're right. In Europe, as you said, those are open markets, wholesale markets, which in some sense facilitate. Having said that, financing storage projects, even in Europe, which do, particularly projects which are not there on the capacity market, is challenging over there also. In MENA, it becomes a bit more challenging, given the fact that there's a single buyer market in most of the countries. And let me take you into the lender's shoes and tell you how a financier thinks about these problems, right? So for a financier, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get certainty on the revenues and costs, so that they're able to determine that there is certain amount of cash flows which is predictable and can be projected, which is used to service the debt. The revenue structure for a battery. Now, Motasam in his presentation gave so many examples of how what are the various kind of utility scale projects. And as you can imagine, there is no one commercial structure which can fit all of those various applications, right? So the first thing I think which lenders will need is an understanding of what is the use case in Middle East, what exactly is, and for that, the off-takers or the authorities which are tendering these projects, they need to be very clear that this is the purpose for which we are tendering the battery project. If that is not clear, that's red flag number one. Once you have defined the use case for a particular project. The second thing is the commercial structure. Now, in Middle East, we have a very well-developed structure for the power market. But trying to necessarily club the various kind of services which battery provides, which are very different than a typical standard power project, which is sale of electricity. Trying to club it there creates its own challenges. So the development of the battery or electrical storage project needs to be considered in its own right. If a particular battery project is being commissioned, let's say, for grid stability or frequency response, then the commercial structure for that kind of a project should be tailored to meet the revenue requirement. And why is that important? Different kind of usages result in different kind of cost, in terms of maintaining degradation, capacity, response times. You need to be able to match revenues and cost, get a predictable revenue source for the lenders to be comfortable. And so far, we have seen, I think so far, there is some work to be done in order for the central authorities to come up with defining the various use cases and having a very clear picture on what is it that a particular project needs to serve.
Sorry, turning the mic on. So what you're saying, defining the business case in terms of the revenue streams possible is a crucial point, because many people talk about storage, and the question is, why do you need storage? What is the revenue stream that the storage will generate? Storage at the end of the day is a network element. A battery can be a load, it can be charged and take energy from the grid, and it can be a generator, and that you can generate whenever you see fit. When there is energy arbitrage, you have a higher rate of selling into the grid, for example, as opposed to charging from the grid. So the main point, you have to define the business model and the value stream of storage project that you have. And then that goes into the points that was talked about in terms of the value stacking. Which service are you providing? Ancillary service, energy arbitrage, frequency regulation, peak load shaving. And once you've defined the application, then you can build the financial model. How about financing? Maybe that's for you, Rohit, and for Laurent. Do you see banks? I know in Europe, banks are open to financing storage projects. You talked about the financial model the business model being clear, but is there a risk on technology? Do you see banks more eager to finance storage projects? Maybe, Laurent, you can tell us, are you doing this on equity, or there is a debt involved here as well? How do you see that evolving? Maybe Rohit, you can go ahead first, and then Laurent.
Sure, thanks. So see that in Europe, where lenders do financing, like I said, depending if the battery project is not contracted, it's on the market, then obviously, because of the nature of the market, lenders are to some extent willing to take the market risk, the price risk. That obviously results in a lower leverage than what you would see, in, let's say, standard IPP projects in Middle East, right? The investors themselves need to be a little cognizant about what are the risks they are taking and what are the equity, what is the equity risk that they are willing to bear on these kind of projects. The challenge with the Middle East market comes that, there is no open market. It's a single buyer market. So, it's at the discretion of the state off-taker. And if they are not, if there is not that level of transparency that, this is my use case or this is how I'm going to use the battery, that obviously brings in a lot of risk from a financing perspective, which is not the case in Europe because, it's an open market. If I don't need to bid for a service for which my system is not designed, I choose not to bid for it, right? And then there'll be a market consultant who will give you a report that this is how they see the market evolving. And banks are willing to take a call on that market report. In Middle East, because it's a single buyer market, it's up to the state of taker. And if they do not define the contracts and their use case very well, then that ambiguity cannot be filled. And that results in the challenging which financiers face. There were projects we were working on where the number of duty cycles were not specified. And then there was another project we worked on in Middle East utility scale. They defined that, the off-taker guarantees we will not use more than, let's say, 2 duty cycles in a day. So that gave, that clarity helped the financiers. In the other case, there wasn't a clarity that, straight off resulted in questions that, how is the battery going to be used? When are you going to do the capex on it, maintenance capex on it? And how are you going to finance it? All those kind of questions.
Sure. So market design, market structure is a big challenge to being able to integrate or introduce storage. Laurent, maybe give us a perspective on the financing of storage systems. How easy it is.
I think at least in the storage for CNI, we are probably in a similar situation to what we have seen some years ago about distributed solar. If you look back 5-6 years ago, no banks was ready really to finance such a market because it's the off-taker risk, because the technology, because etc. We had a lot of reasons, or a lot of people had a lot of reasons for explaining that financing would not be possible. Actually, it is possible, and we have shown that it's possible, and not only us. We have been able to get some long-term non-recourse financing for our portfolio of solar assets. So today we don't see really reasons why the same is not possible for storage. There are some fundamentals that we have that we need to have in place. We need to select properly the clients. Of course, if you work with non-bankable clients, it's difficult. But if you select properly your client, it helps. You need to have a size. You cannot finance on a project-by-project basis. You need to finance it on a portfolio basis. So you need to have a sufficient portfolio. So there are some magic numbers in the market for banks. The magic number is $50 million. So you need to come with a sizable portfolio, which is relatively homogeneous in terms of type of clients, type of technology, type of usage. And when you have it, if you have bankable clients and if you have a proper contract, this is bankable, and you can expect to get it financed on a long-term basis by banks. So we are very optimistic. Of course, the key is to be able to reach this size, and which means that for a certain time you need to have some deep pocket to be able to create this portfolio. That's exactly what we currently do. We are putting some money on the table to create a portfolio, and very soon this will be refinanced by banks, as we did in the solar CNI.
And Siraj is doing equipment lease model for the engine, the PV, and the battery. System.
We are. Yeah, we are. This is our model. We don't we rent or we lease or we sell energy depending on the type of business, depending on the country legislation, etc. But we are not a supplier or an EPC contractor by essence. We are a developer. So.
All right. I want to we have a lot of questions in the Q&A, and I'm gonna soon hand it over to Munif to go through those. But I want to just have one final point of discussion to the panelists. I mean, in MENA, we don't have currently any regulation specific to storage. I mean, there are no clear mandates from the vertically integrated utilities about deploying storage. And market design, like Rohit said, is a challenge in terms of being a developer coming and says, I want to put a storage system standalone on the grid or part of a solar PV power plant, for example. There is no clear business case. We're hoping in the big projects that we see in Rabat, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE that there is a business case, like the question that Mu'tasim asked, that there is a business case that justifies adding 1 or 2 hours of storage, for example, for firming, and give it a capacity commitments from a solar plant. But the question to the panelists, in your view, where do you see the market in MENA developing first in storage, and why? Which markets you think would be interesting? Is it going to be utility scale in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which now none of us really can give a clear answer as what's the business case for storage and big projects in the GCC, or is it residential? Mu'tasim, maybe you wanna?
Yeah, perfect. So I mean, the interesting aspect of our region, it's so versatile. So you got saturated grids like Jordan, and pretty new countries like Kuwait, like Saudi Arabia, with very low renewable energy penetration. If you take the case of Jordan, then you would see there could be a case for both residential, C&I, as well as utility scale. So you can target storage on the generation side, on the grid side, or on the demand side. On the demand side, of course, for peak shaving in certain situations. On the grid side, to relieve the transition, the congestion on the grid that they're currently facing, to enable more renewable energy resources to be connected to the grid.
You're saying Jordan could be a candidate market because of the high penetration already of renewables?
It's a really nice case to work on. It's 6 gigawatt generation capacity with 2 gigawatt of solar. So that's very high renewable energy penetration. If you go back to the graph I showed, we're at a renewable energy penetration exceeding 35%, yet with zero storage on the grid, be it on any side. So, but of course, the obstacle to overcome is the single buyer model or the vertically integrated utilities. The regulations are not there, and there should be a lot of, let's say, knowledge sharing coming from Europe to Jordan to build the case for them to invest in that route. Okay. The financial aspect of it is still missing. But if you look at Saudi Arabia, it could also be interesting in the new developments such as NEOM, Red Sea, and whatnot. Storage is coming, and it's being built from scratch, including storage, right?
Yes, and there is a big project already with a massive battery happening on the Red Sea.
Yeah. And then on the residential side, perhaps, in my humble opinion, in the UAE could be very early at this stage, unless it's applications like what Laurent mentioned, or if, let's say, they want to increase the capacity of resources to be connected to the grid, given the limitations we're currently facing. So each country has its own aspect.
Okay. Well, we await in Jordan having the government come up with the regulations that justifies the business model, because they don't see the value, unfortunately, still in how storage can play a role and benefit on the single buyer model. Any other views on the markets, Laurent or Rohit? Which market do you think would be interesting other than Jordan?
Well, if you ask me the question, I will talk about the C&I market. I believe that that there is a huge potential. The application I've seen about hybrid, if you think about Saudi, so today Saudi is not addressable for this hybrid business. Diesel being relatively inexpensive in Saudi, but the day when subsidies on diesel are over in Saudi, it's coming, and the day diesel is expensive in Saudi, we are talking about gigawatt of diesel generators that we will be able to offset with a combination of solar, battery, and diesel. So it's going to be a massive market, and it will help the country to shift from diesel to renewable without the necessity to deploy a huge grid infrastructure that would be needed. And the same applies to Iraq. The same applies to most of the countries in the region. So we strongly believe that C&I that the application of storage for C&I in this region is massive.
Yeah.
And the good thing is that the regulation on you were mentioning about the single buyer model and the restriction it puts on using a battery for utility scale. We don't have the same constraints when it comes to a hybrid. So very optimistic on the C&I market in that.
Definitely, and with the reduction in the cost of storage and the removal of subsidies, I think C&I will keep picking up. That's a true statement. I think. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just saying, yes, I agree with Laurent. So in fact, I was reading a report. Europe is a bit more developed power market, and I was reading that in Europe, utility scale project constitutes almost 50% of the storage projects, while in Middle East it constitutes 90%. So So one data point is obviously there's a lot of scope for improvement on the CNI and on the demand side. But the question is also the question it begs is that why is it so low? I think for the demand side storage to grow, some of the things that we may need to consider. One, the cost of electricity needs, and it is happening, as the markets evolve, the cost of electricity starts getting borne by the consumer, the true cost of electricity, which means that you will see that, like Jordan, there might be other countries which will start imposing, let's say, peak time tariffs, which are different than off-peak time tariffs. Once these kind of things start kicking in on the consumer level, then probably you will see a big incentive for the consumers to shift to such kind of storage system, because then it makes economic sense for them. Right now, if I need to pay the same tariff for charging and discharging the battery, then it doesn't make sense for me to have a battery, right? But if I have a price differential there, then that probably when I will start investing and consider storage solution at a consumer level. At a utility scale level, it depends on the. If I would put it on two axes, it depends on the real requirement for at a sector level to implement storage solutions and the willingness for that particular sector regulators. Let's say the requirement comes, let's say, from the variable renewable energy penetration, which, as you said, it's very high in Jordan, and that's why Jordan was one of the first countries, to have tendered out a independent storage project. They already had one other, pilot project which got commissioned I think in 2019, I believe. So, they have a requirement, they have the willingness, they are trying. But in case of Jordan, there were also certain other low-lying fruits which they could have invested in to further improve the capacity of the transmission network in any event. Other economies, I believe, as they start improving it, there's definitely going to be a requirement, and it makes sense for all of these economies to start to be ahead of the curve, start thinking of as and when all of these big a project that they're tendering out become operational, how they will absorb it into their given network. So yep, it absolutely makes sense for them to start.
I mean, that's very true, Rohit. I think, but it will take a while for depth of penetration to reach the value where it necessitates solar in big markets like Saudi Arabia. So utility scale, I think, will take time, but I think I agree with Laurent that CNI is the low-hanging fruit. With that, I think with the remaining minutes, I want to hand it over to Munif Barakat to go through some of the questions that we have. Munif, you're with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead and sign off. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. I wish to thank Dr. Raed for joining us, moderating this session. It has been a very useful discussion. Mu'tasim, Rohit, Laurent, thank you very much for the input. We have 5 minutes left, and we have more than 20 questions received. So that will be quite a challenge, but I'll try to group questions together so we can go through this pretty quick. I think most of the questions have been focused on the application, because they've heard a couple of applications while you go through. And I think these are the most important ones to address, because they would basically emphasize on the value of energy storage in our grids. So I'll start with Laurent. Since you've spoken about the CNI sector, I have a question from Mr. Ashraf, who says, why peak shaving? Why would a factory, for instance, consider an energy storage unit for peak shaving? Especially when we speak about a factory, obviously it's probably $1, $2, $3 million, let's say, investment. If it is a big, let's say, battery of 1 megawatt or more, they might compare it to, I don't know, buying 2 more trucks or 1 extra production line. And that's when you invest, when you compare this to this, then probably the energy storage is not the most economical solution. So how do you work on that? And how do you de-risk such an investment in a factory and prove the value of energy storage?
Yes, thank you for the question. So actually, first, for our client, what we propose is not a solution where they will have to invest $1 million or so. We propose to rent the equipment, or they pay as a service, so they don't invest. It's us making the investment. Now, what is how value is generated by such peak shaving solution? Simply today, when you don't have sufficient electricity from the grid at certain time of the day, you are obliged to switch part of your loads to diesel. And running diesel, so not in Saudi, but in UAE, if you produce electricity with diesel, the cost of your electricity is 30, 40, sometimes 100% more expensive than the electricity you can buy from the grid. When you put a peak shaving solution, yes, there is an investment of installing this peak shaving solution, but you switch your electric consumption from expensive diesel to the grid. So you save a lot on your cost of electricity, and on the long run, it generates a lot of value. And to avoid our clients to have to do the front investments, that's where we come with our fully financed solution. So they don't have to do these front investments. They just enjoy the savings by shifting their load from diesel to the grid, notwithstanding the fact that they reduce their carbon footprint.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And I have a follow-up question on this from Mr. Mark Ayub, also to you, please, Laurent. Like, he asked, like, if you would use the excess of solar energy to store it and utilize it later, then you lose the opportunity to export it to the grid, like especially if you have net metering, I don't know, with DO and so on. So how do the economics of that work?
Yeah, no, that's a very valid question. When you have a net metering, policy, it's not obvious, but actually, even when you have a net metering, you have some clients of us, or some clients, not necessarily clients of us, having some solar systems permanently generating excess solar energy. So they have some clients in Dubai, they have installed a solar system which is too big, and so they constantly produce too much electricity. So they have some credit. They cannot cash out, and they cannot get the energy, any benefit out of it. So that's where a solution like the on-demand solar energy helps, because you can come and take this energy by charging your batteries. There are some other solutions we can, but this is one solution, and one of the first source of energy we are using in Siraj for this application.
Perfect. Thank you, Laurent. I'll move to Mu'tasim, please. I have a couple of questions to you, since you mentioned utility scale, let's say, applications for energy storage. And I'll get two follow-up questions from Mr. Muhammad Walid Khalid, who's asking how can a battery compensate or provide virtual inertia? And the second question, which is anonymous, regarding the frequency regulations, like how would you design an energy storage system? Let's say, is it like a 1 hour system, 4 hour system, and so on? How would you design it to be useful for frequency regulation? And why don't we see that in the Middle East?
Yes, so maybe to start with the last one and then go onwards. So why don't we see it in the Middle East? Probably would be, the case is not there yet for it, probably financially. They could not build a structure to sell such services on a utility scale, given the constraints and limitations we're facing on our grids. In terms of frequency control and virtual inertia, so battery solutions on a utility scale are used for primary and secondary control, basically to support the grid. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of how fast the response rate and what type of power can be given back to the grid, active or reactive power, to support such cases. And given on in a battery solution, the response rate is way faster than probably any conventional on specific areas on the grid. And that's where the technology is being developed and enhanced to support further grid frequency and as well as virtual inertia. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Mu'tasim. And just a quick question, please, from Mr. Ais. He's asking about recycling of lithium-ion batteries. Is that something like a topic that is there a business case for that, or it doesn't make sense to recycle these batteries?
I mean, well, we're more on the inverter part more than the lithium-ion and the battery side. But definitely, if you look at the future of all the batteries, lithium-ion basically in vehicles, in storage facilities, and utility scale, residential, commercial, there should be a case for it in the very near future on how to decommission those projects and what to do with the batteries next.
Especially that the lifetime is not so long, right? Like probably 3,000, 5,000 cycles is not much if you use that frequently.
Yeah, it's a very hot topic in Europe, and of course, the regulations there are very strict on what to do next on decommissioning such projects.
Thank you for that, Mu'tasim. Just for, sorry, we cannot answer all the questions, but at least I want to group a couple of questions that I would like to direct to Rohit, please. From Mr. Jose Manuel, and there is from Mr. Thomas Borlier. And both of them ask more towards what kind of market reform. We spoke about that there's no very clear, let's say, business case for energy storage as of today, and this is the reason why we don't see much of these projects today. But what kind of market reform or change that you would expect or suggest in order to boost this market, and so we could have a proper market like in Europe, in Australia, or in the United States?
Sure. See, I think for utility scale projects, like I mentioned earlier, the key market reform that you need is, first of all, each of these markets would separately probably need to assess what is their specific requirement in terms of storage, because a storage solution can provide various kind of services. They need to understand, first of all, what is the services that they need at a sector level. After having clarity on what is that they need to start thinking about decoupling it and think about it differently than how they would have viewed traditional, power projects, either conventional or solar, because these, this cannot be thought of in terms of sale of electricity. These are specific services, not necessarily sale of electricity. So you need to have commercial structures which are suited for these. And obviously, since Europe already has it, it can be a good starting point to understand from Europe how they are doing it. But the solutions that come up for these kind of structuring needs to be catering to the specific issues of each of these jurisdictions. Once you have this kind of a commercial structure and framework ready, then you go out in the market, you ask private developers to come in, invest in, and then when you are evaluating these projects, currently the evaluation works on the L1, the lowest cost. Potentially a new way of evaluating the project will need to be looked at, where you are not looking at it purely from which is the cheapest project, but potentially you are trying to rank project based on which project is adding the maximum value to the electricity sector as a whole, rather than being the cheapest. So I think these are some of the things which the regulators need to look at, and as we discussed, as the renewable energy project, the penetration becomes higher, they will start accelerating these kind of projects.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot, Rohit. I appreciate your thorough response to this question. We are almost 5 minutes late on this session. Thank you very much for the time for joining us today. We had hundreds of attendees on Zoom and on social media. Thank you very much for staying with us till the end, and for the many questions that you've got. Please send us an email to info@solararabic.com or info@MESIA. Just get your questions through, and we will definitely forward it to the right person, especially if you are interested in any of the solutions that have been presented throughout the presentations today. You can leave a comment on the registration page itself. We'll definitely get your feedback wherever and forward it to the right person. I wish to thank the panel today, starting from Dr. Raed that had to leave us early, Laurent, Rohit, Mu'tasim, thank you very much. This was very useful, let's say, to listen to the experience that your companies have got, and personally the experience that you have shared with us, and looking forward to host you in the upcoming sessions. Wish you all a good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, and